Hey everyone, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. Glad to be here with you. Today's a little different. I love every guest that we have on the show, and it's exciting for me to get to meet great authors from around the world. Today's super special for me as a Canadian and as a musician. I get the chance to sit down with a gentleman. His name is Bob Young, and Bob is a great person to talk to, super amazing to talk to. His background is deep. The well that he draws from is deep, and he has a very famous younger brother, Canadian icon, Neil Young. You'll know him from music if you've listened to the radio at all. You probably have heard of Neil Young. So I had Bob come on to talk about his new book. We had a great conversation. We jumped in right away, like right in. I didn't even have time to do the intro. The conversation was awesome. So I'm going to make this episode a little different. It's going to be kind of a magazine style. I'm going to pop in here and there with you, kind of set up my next question that I asked Bob, and give you a little different listening experience here on Living the Next Chapter than what you're used to. So that's why I wanted to jump on at the beginning and introduce you to an amazing person. A thrill for me to have on the show. And again, I'm here to celebrate great authors. I love great Canadian authors, and I love great Canadian musicians. So I'm in my happy place, and I wanted to share with you here on the podcast. This is Bob Young, Living the Next Chapter. Talk about his book, his musical family, and the great things happening in his life. Here on Living the Next Chapter, here's Bob. Here's a little snippet of what we're going to talk about.
And people who are fans of Neil's will see in that something that, to my knowledge, nobody's ever done before. I've never I've never done interviews about Neil, but he and I talking together, there's stuff in there that no interview would ever stumble upon, probably. So our cousin is editing the thing, who knows us, and she was the news editor at a major television station for years and knows how to do this. So she's in charge of that a little bit. It looks like it'll be really interesting. So the Neil Young fan base out there, and probably interviewers have been trying to figure out how to get him to do an interview for the last 50 or 60 years, will look at this and they'll see stuff in there that they never would have gotten to. And never will, probably. He doesn't do that stuff. And the people in the family and our friends, when they're approached about Neil, they usually refuse to discuss it. What is, because they don't want to say something that shouldn't be said, or they just don't want to become an avenue in Neil's career. They figure whoever that is should be going to his management company and talking to him, not to somebody that he went to school with or something, That's really the reason. And I've done the same thing. If people writing come to me, I'll say no. Eventually I'll write my own book, and, maybe I will. Simple.
So I had started off asking Bob about a song that he had written along with his brother, and was featured in conjunction with the release of the book. And to get his thoughts about the song and all that, I'll have a link to it in the show notes where you can actually see the band performing. But again, it's so great to have Bob on to talk about writing music with his brother and all that. So here's Bob talking a little bit about the song that corresponds with the book release here on the podcast. Here we go.
Yeah. Well, that song is, as you mentioned it, it's findable through my website, bobyounggolf.com, but it's on YouTube. Get to it on YouTube. The last time anybody asked me about it, I was in a little pub in Florida a couple of weeks ago, and where did we do it? I think finally ran up the song title, Hey America. That's what the title is. Hey America, Neil Young. And then it went, it might have been connected to Neil Young Archives. So then the YouTube thing came up and it said, "Hey America, Young Bob and the Peterboroughs," which was the name of the band I used when we recorded it. Yeah, and we did it in Peterborough. So 2.5 years ago, actually 2 years ago, last October. Anyhow, now the lyric in that song, if you listen to it, it was relevant when I wrote it. And now, if anything, given what's going on in the United States, especially, it's more relevant. So I think I'm going to call I'll talk to my brother about it and send his management company and say, "Hey, I think anybody else would be interested in covering this song?" Because it actually, when I tell people what the lyric are, I watch these guys in this little bar called Moe's Bar in Smyrna Beach, Florida. No relation to Moe Norman. Moe was their last name, as a matter of fact. They grew the family in Smyrna Beach. And they liked the lyric. And a line in it that says something like, "Hey, America, give love a chance. You're the beacon of freedom. Liberty free." The line, "set liberty free," strikes a harmonic in the mind of a U.S. citizen, especially somebody who's paying attention. And I don't know. We'll see what happens with it. Maybe nothing will happen. But if people started playing, it'd be interesting to see from my perspective, I'd never done a song before. That's it. One song.
So I asked Bob a little bit more about the song and how it came to be, and he gave us a little bit more information about the writing process of the song, and here's what his thoughts were.
It's in some respects, initially I thought it was sort of like a fluke that I did it, because I saw something on television one day and wrote down I had a couple of lines in mind, and when I picked up my guitar, I discovered I could actually play it. I could, knew the chords, and I could start singing the song. But I had never written a song and sung it from one end to the other. Never done that. So I just kept adding to the lyric, and I kept playing the thing. It's very simple musically, but lyrically it makes sense. So I just kept doing it, and it took me quite a while to figure out how to get it in my mind so that I could pick up the guitar and play the whole song. Now I've got 6, 7, 8 songs, a couple on a piano. Once I figured out the process.
So we jump from talking about the song that accompanies the book to the book itself, and Bob talks about his time with Moe Norman, famous golfer, and some of the stories that his book includes about this interesting character. And this is what Bob was saying.
The point here, this book is mine to golf, about my experience with Moe Norman, who's a famous ball striker in the game, equal to Ben Hogan. I knew him really well. We played together for 40 years and had a private practice area or two in Florida, south of in the Daytona Beach area, in Smyrna Beach also. And places at the odd time, players off the PGA Tour who knew how to find us would show up and watch him hit balls and talk. And that was interesting. Some of those guys, they were really good, but he was better. And I hit probably somewhere maybe in the vicinity of 800,000 to 1 million golf balls with Moe. And we had private practice area where we'd meet and hit 250 or 300 balls every morning. That was just the beginning of the day, but the whole day was golf. It was hooked into it. So he had such a thorough grasp of what caused the ball to go from wherever it is to where he wanted to be next. But he didn't have he didn't know how to articulate it. So, but he would tell me everything he could as best he could. So he said things that were, you have to have a quiet mind. And then he said, it's like music. But what he meant was you have to have a quiet mind. Well, if you get into metaphysical discussions, a quiet mind can be a long way into the mind world. There are people living in the Tibetan mountains for centuries they have quiet minds also. Moe's idea of a quiet mind, he didn't let people interfere with his quiet mind. And if that happened, he would disappear and he wouldn't go back to wherever that happened. That was the way he dealt with it. And it worked. But he stayed away from things that didn't meld with his view of the world.
I asked Bob how he actually met Moe originally, how this whole relationship started, that the two of them would be so close together. And this is how it all began for Bob and Moe.
Well, I played amateur golf tournaments when I was a kid. And was one of the better amateurs in the province of Ontario. And Moe was 10, 12 years older than me. So I'd see him at the tournaments, and he gradually got to know who I was because I was always at the golf tournaments. And then when I joined the Canadian PGA, he had already become a member of it. He basically had no choice. And he'd come to the golf course that I was connected to, Pine Valley Golf Club in Woodbridge, Ontario, which is now the national club. The pro there was a guy called George Clifton, a very hospitable and likable in soul, fast, a real. He's one of the people that actually had the energy with others that helped create the Canadian Tour, which I played. I was interested in playing the game. I didn't want to work in a pro shop and sell golf balls and be nice to the members. I could be nice to them, but I would rather play golf. So, and that was what Moe did. Moe would show up bouncing the ball on his golf club and get a few shots and go out and play 9 holes or something. I just got to know him, and then where we all went in Florida was a place called Ormond Beach, which is on the north side of Daytona, a golf course called Tomoka Oaks. And a raft of Canadian golf pros would show up there, people who like playing the game and hit balls, practice, and play golf. So we did that in the winter. And Moe was there too. And L.V. Thompson, who was eventually a Canadian PGA champion, great striker of golf balls too. And the best putter that Moe Norman and I ever encountered. So if you look at my book, the last chapter is called, I think it's The Magic of Putting. Describes what L.B. Thompson told me. Now I have others. I've been in Florida. The weather wasn't very good where I was, so I hit a lot of putts. And it's very interesting doing that. For 3 or 4 months, I did that. And I hit balls too, but I hit a lot of putts. Interesting, the mechanics of putting are very similar to a full shot when you figure out what actually makes it work right. The mental side of it.
So Moe was a very unique golfer, and I asked Bob about the technique that Moe used in his golfing, and he kind of broke down a little bit about Moe's approach to golf and gave us a little background into the technique behind how Moe's golf was so successful as a player. This is what he had to say.
The technique is described in my book, but basically, you put the ball at the target. It's sitting in front of you. Put it at the target, exactly at the target. Look up in the air, and you'll sense the place where it begins its descent, the apex of the flight. Your mind and eyes come back along that line to where you are, and you feel it. You just keep doing it, and your body will pick up the feeling. You start to make the right moves to get the ball to fly into the image that you've created. So deliver the energy into the image. That's the thing. And then the more energy you know how to tune to, the better the results get. It's that energy that's used in the power for creating the image of the shot to be. It's the same energy that's used to create the song I was talking about.
So again, as a musician, talking to Bob, I'm like having a full circle moment here. Again, talking to musical royalty from the Young family with Neil as his younger brother. But he gets into a little bit more about him and Neil and working and crafting the song that we talked about near the beginning of the episode. Get a little more detail and behind the scenes around how the song ties into the book and how this is all communicated to Neil's network of fans. And it's exciting to kind of get this behind the scenes about all this, how this all works. And I think you're going to enjoy this, especially if you're a Neil Young fan, Bob Young fan of golf, fan of music, all got you covered. Here's Bob explaining a little bit more about that connection with Neil and bringing it all together with the book.
That's by the songs in the book. My brother and I talk about this in a Zoom call. And it isn't, it's almost yet, it's almost finished. That's a little section. It might even be a separate audio or separate audio visual item on my website. But we've got 10 or 15-minute edit of he and I talking about a lot of different things, but golf related. It'll be on my website. Yeah, and it's my book. The audio book, will go to the entire membership of Neil Young Archives, which is 25 or 30,000 people. And it will, there's a fellow I met in Florida who's a member of Neil Young Archives, really liked the book, and he liked the song and all that stuff. And he said, this is a great collector's item, this audio book with a song in it. I thought that's a good thought. So we're going to introduce it that way. This is all you golfers out there who are Neil Young Archive members. You're obviously also Neil Young fans, or you wouldn't be a member of Neil Young Archives. But here's this song. It's not on any other recorded format.
So you get that? It's the only way to get this song with Neil Young on it. The only way to get it is to be part of this. So, or check out the YouTube video. So that's pretty unique, especially for any Neil Young fans out there. You're looking for something unique and special from Neil and Bob. Here you go. You might be hearing about it this first here, but here you go. Great song available through the book.
If you want it, there it is at whatever. I think we're going to sell it. The normal price is $12.99. I think on the website, on this thing, it'll be $9.99, and the book will be $14.99 instead of $18 or $17.99. So, and then the significant portion of the gross will go to the Bridge School, which is a charity. The Bridge School has been in existence for a long time and does a lot of good things for kids that need the assistance. So anyhow, that's what I'm going to do with the current thing we're doing with the book is organizing it for that kind of event. And I was talking to Hart Maroney a few days ago. He owns a golf course called Tamarack, which is in Ennismore, Ontario, 15 minutes from Peterborough, Bridge North, that area. And it's been there for quite a while. Got an excellent practice facility, which I use. And the golf course itself is good. It's really good, actually. And he said the climate has been, there's no snow. We're starting to see green grass and trees with buds on them. And he said, I think we'll be open around early April. And that is early. It really is. There's no snow. I live in the Kawartha Lakes area. The road into where I live is a dead end road. When you get to the end of it, that's where I am. And they've only plowed it twice this winter. And last winter when I was there were snowbanks 8, 10, 12 feet high, plowed up. I mean, we had snow. The people who lived there said they hadn't seen that much snow for 30 or 40 years. Now there's nothing. And it's really, an early season by the looks of things. So I'll be up there earlier than I thought I'd be.
So I was curious, and I asked Bob how long it took to write this book, and this is what he said.
Well, I kept notes way back around 1979, 78, 80. I'd write stuff down when it went through my mind so that I have it. And I used to think, maybe some of these days I'll pull all this together and turn it into a book. So a couple years, 3 years ago or something, I was looking at it and I thought, well, Moe's been deceased for about 20 years. And all these guys are out there beating the ball around trying to make themselves a few $1 million. And somewhere back there quite a few years ago, Tiger Woods among others, was watching Moe hit balls, and Tiger said only 2 people have ever owned their swing, Moe Norman and Ben Hogan. That's what I wanted to do, is what he was saying. He still wants to do it. And sometimes he does. And sometimes some of these other guys do too. But what Moe did, I remember standing there watching them watch Moe. And Scott Simpson, who won a U.S. Open years ago, said to me one day that, Bob, you know how lucky you are to hit balls with Moe. And, I said, I've been doing this for decades. I know what it looks like, exactly what it looks like. He said, it's amazing. He looks at where he wants it to go, hits it, and it goes there. Yeah.
So I found a little clip of Moe talking on an interview, and here's a little inside peek into how Moe would answer a question or share his thought. I love this. Here's Moe.
I have a little robot that goes around with me. I tell her what I'm thinking. I tell her what I see. I tell my little robot all my hopes and fears. It listens and remembers everything it hears. At first, my little robot followed my command, but after years of training, it's gotten out of hand. It doesn't care what's right or wrong, or what is false or true, but no matter what I try now, it tells me what to do. Right there.
One day I said to Moe, what's in your mind right before you hit the ball? He looks at me for a few seconds and finally says, I said, what do you do right before you hit it? What do you do to, Finally he says, you have to make the chosen line of aim. That was his description. So I thought about that, and I thought you have to make the chosen line of aim. That's where that's where I got the idea. Fine, you're going to make the chosen line of aim, obviously, is where the ball's going to go. Going to go that way. Well, he could hit it on any trajectory that he wanted to. His chosen line of aim would be connected to where he wanted the ball to wind up. And so what I did was I thought, okay, there's a destination point. It goes a certain distance, and then it goes into free fall. It was out of mulling that over that I came up with the idea of creating the image of the shot to be, which was basically what Moe did. You have to make the chosen line of aim. So I broke it down into, so the components were somebody else could come along and assemble making the chosen line of aim by putting the ball at the destination point, finding the apex mentally. You don't measure anything. You just look up in the air, and what happens is you sense it. Your eyes, you find it, and if you pay attention, you feel it in your body. I feel it in my solar plexus. But at first I didn't even notice that. I just said, it's got to go up there to fall here. I was in the practice fairway with Wally Kuchar. His son, Matt, or his nephew, Matt Kuchar, is a very successful PGA Tour player. You might have heard of him. And Wally would come, he knew where Moe and I hit balls. So every once in a while, Wally would show up, and he played the tour too. He actually finished, I think, 3rd or 4th at Doral at a big tournament back in those days that was in Miami. Anyhow, Wally's standing there one day watching me hit 2.5 or 3 wood shots, and they were practically identical. And finally he said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm aiming at that purple weed out there. It's about 230 or 35 yards away. And he said, what you're doing is, he said that these shots are, carbon copies of one another, or worse to that effect. And I said, I don't know. I'm just looking up in the air, and I can see where it's got to get to land on the weed. And after that, I was thinking to myself, I did look up in the air. Then the next time I went out and hit balls, I did the same thing, and I noticed that I felt it. But I was just looking up in the air. My eyes came back to where I was. I had the whole thing in my mind, and I turned away from it and hit the ball. I didn't force it. I just swung the club. Now there are refinements of this that I have, what I was doing this winter in Florida. So I'm going to, when it's warm enough in Canada, I'm in South Carolina right now. Actually, it's a perfect day right now. I just got here. So I'll probably go out there maybe later this afternoon or tomorrow with a friend of mine here and get her machine set up so she can shoot what I'm doing and record it live. And then if I start doing what I've got in mind, I can talk about it as it's happening. That way it's got a little more spontaneity to it. And given the technology these days, like what we're using, these Zoom calls, this is great. I mean, I'll incorporate it into the next thing I write about golf. I'm going to do an audio book called Cosmic Golf, The Zone, and the Golden Stroke. So it'll have that audio aspect to it. And the website will have the audio visual stuff that I do also. It's my brother and I are having interesting conversations about this because he's got the machinery in place with his archive site, Neil Young Archives, to use stuff like this. The Zoom call that I mentioned a while ago that he and I did, that's being edited, that's going to be interesting to look at. I know I've seen the printed version of it, the transcript, and I remember doing the conversation. So it'll go on my website, but it'll go on his website also. And people who are fans of Neil's will see in that something that, to my knowledge, nobody's ever done before. I've never I've never done interviews about Neil, but he and I talking together, there's stuff in there that no interview would ever stumble upon, probably. So our cousin is editing the thing, who knows us, and she was the news editor at a major television station for years and knows how to do this. So she's in charge of that little bit. It looks like it'll be really interesting. So the Neil Young fan base out there, and probably interviewers have been trying to figure out how to get him to do an interview for the last 50 or 60 years, will look at this and they'll see stuff in there that they never would have gotten to.
So here's the point where I was like, oh, this is gold. Because, again, I was so thrilled to have Bob come on my podcast to talk about his book. But then we start getting into more about Neil and how the press wants to get a piece of Neil, how they go through the family to get to Neil. And here we are, Bob and I talking, and it just felt so natural. And again, I was so thrilled to have Bob on the podcast. And I'm so glad he went here in the conversation, because I think it gives you behind the scenes about the Young family and everything that happens that you might not understand or see, and maybe the impact of media on a family like Neil Young and Bob Young. And just a little bit of information that I found is really interesting as a host of the podcast.
He doesn't do that stuff. And the people in the family and our friends, when they're approached about Neil, they usually refuse to discuss it, which is, because they don't want to say something that shouldn't be said, or they just don't want to become an avenue in Neil's career, or because they figure whoever that is should be going to his management company and talking to him, not to somebody that he went to school with or something. That's really the reason. And I've done the same thing. When people writing come to me, I say no. Eventually, I'll write my own book, and maybe I will. So.
And that right there is a book I would love to read, having Bob's thoughts on Neil and all that. That's amazing. So I went on to talk to Bob more about Moe and to give us some insight into Moe, because the interviews that I did in preparation to talk to Bob, there was a lot of interviews and a lot of commentary around Moe not being accepted in the golf world. Moe was very different. He was very unique, special, and didn't fit the mold of a typical, air quotes, golfer. And at some points, it seemed like he was a little bit shunned and overlooked and sad. that he didn't fit the mold. So I wanted to get Bob's thoughts on Moe and get a little bit more information, a little insight behind the scenes, how he saw Moe, because his relationship with Moe was very special and very unique. And here's what Bob said.
That he was essentially ostracized by some, and, it was either I've forgotten whether it was the RCGA or the Ontario Golf Association, went to his place in his family home in Kitchener. They wanted to see all the prizes he'd won. This was when he was an amateur. Well, what they were actually doing was trying to figure out if he'd been selling them. And so eventually, out of that process, they revoked his amateur status, and then he became a member of the Canadian PGA. So he had to deal with stuff like that happening. Yeah, he didn't have anything when he was young. He had no money. He used to hitchhike to golf tournaments, and he'd sleep in the sand traps, and then win the golf tournament. I heard about it before I got to know him, but I had no problem talking to him at all. And I always treated him as a social equal. I'd have dinner. I invited him to my place in Florida. He stayed at a friend's house all winter, one year in the Smyrna Beach. It was good. I mean, and then, along came natural golf and Titleist. Wally Uline, director, basically, in my view, probably the thinking power that created the Titleist Corporation, which is enormous. Wally called, forgotten when it was, maybe in the early 90s, called a guy called Craig Shankland, who was from England. Craig had been in the States for a long time. He had a golf course in Smyrna Beach called Hidden Lakes. And he did 19 years of clinics with Moe. And one day, Wally Uline called him and said, you think Moe would like $5,000 a month for life? Wally, Craig Shankland said to Moe, would you like $5,000 a month for life? And Moe, oh, yeah. Yes. But that's where it came from. So the Titleist Corporation, out of recognition for what he accomplished, that was a gesture. I was there when that happened. It changed Moe's life. All of a sudden, he had guaranteed money, and he was doing okay. Right, I saw him. He was very appreciative of that, and he always had this old visor that said Titleist on the top of this. As Craig Shankland said, he probably never had it. And it looked like it had never been to the washing machine, that thing. Anyhow, that was one thing. And that happened. And I thought, good for Titleist, Titleist Corporation just made the right move, the right gesture. It isn't a move. In appreciation of what Moe had accomplished, and Moe understood it. He was so very thankful, and because apart from people being appreciative of how good a striker of golf balls he was, which he heard wherever he hit them, that was something that made a huge difference to his existence, and he kept doing clinics, and it was probably a year or two before he died. We were at this club in Florida, in New Smyrna Beach, and I said, how's everything working out? And he looked at me and said, Bob, I got almost $1 million saved. And I thought, wow, you could be here for another 50 years with that, the way you spend money. And but it didn't last very much longer after that. And I said, what are you going to do with it? He said, I'll give it to my family. So somehow in his family, people gained from that. He helped them. And he had several siblings, quite a few. I never met any of them. They never came to watch him play golf. I could never figure out why. But that's the way his life was. And he just, he kept going. and he was a master at what he did. But mentally, that quiet mind, as years went by, to this day, it sticks in my mind as he was very deep about a lot of things. He looked at the world and rejected a lot of the things that it does, it being the choices the human race makes.
Bob talks about the timeliness of the book and what's happening in the world today, a lot about what's happening in the US and even here in Canada, and how this book really relates to what we're seeing in the news and in our world. And here's what he said.
And right now is a perfect example of that. Look at what's going on. The power of choice has been misused, to put it mildly. Wars and problems, more wars. I mean, they've made a business out of the war equipment business. That's not a complimentary thing to say, but nevertheless, I'd like to see an audit on what's going on in the Ukraine and Israel out of abject curiosity. Whatever it is, they'd be better off spent buying food for kids that don't have enough food to eat or something. So, Moe would look at that. Not for me, he'd say, and he would go back to the golf course. He went to the golf course and he stayed there. That's what he did. And if he went places where people didn't really want him around for one reason or another, he wouldn't go back there. And after, I'd say once in a while, I said to Moe, let's go over there. He said, no, I don't go there. And once in a while, he'd tell me why. But usually, I didn't even ask him. If he wanted to tell me, fine. But it was, he's a one of a kind. There's no question about that. Everybody's a one of a kind, but was definitely unique.
I asked Bob where that depth came from for Moe. Did he have any idea of the source of that? Because Moe thought on a different level than others, and this is how Bob described that.
Well, he went to he started playing golf. He hit balls at the range at Rockaway Golf Club in Kitchener. Lloyd Tucker was the pro there. And there's a mention of Lloyd Tucker in my book, commenting about Moe and me, as a matter of fact. So Moe told him, out of all the balls I hit, he told Lloyd Tucker what I was capable of doing. And you could read it in the book. Other people don't know. If they read the book, they'll see it. They'll know what he said, and because Lloyd Tucker repeated it. At any rate, one day Moe looked at me. We were hitting balls in Oak Hill, Florida, at a private place we had there. And he looked at me, he said, Bob, you're the closest in the game to Ben Hogan. And I was really accurate. If I aimed at something, I hit it. And I knew why, and I still do. Now, because of what I wrote in this book, I've been thinking about it. And mentally, my concept of it is more refined than it was when I was doing that, which was about 40 years ago. And a little longer now. It is, the average golfer goes out there and they're trying to hit the ball and get it from the tee to the green and into the cup as few shots as possible. And there's stuff in this book that would help them do that. The rest of it, the story, there's more. I mean, it was, you asked a question about his choices and his quiet mind, and that, there's reference to the fact that he was in a car accident when he was about 5 years old. I think he was on a sleigh or a toboggan or something, and came down a hill, and anyhow, a car banged him on the head. And I guess it was a pretty serious situation. And some people think that it was because of that he became the way he was. And then there was discussion about him possibly being autistic. However, in my view, he decided what he wanted to do. He looked at the world, and he went to the golf course, and he liked hitting golf balls. So he just kept hitting them. He didn't want anything to do with the rest of this stuff. He didn't want anything to do with the business unless it had to do with winning money at a golf tournament. But, that was fine. But that was it. He was not, he wasn't out there on the employment line. He wasn't, doing any of that stuff. He went to the golf course. That was his world. And he stayed in it.
So Bob also shared a little bit around his growing up, his family connections with some amazing writers and musicians, and gave us, again, a little bit more insight, which also then corresponds with Neil and gives you a little shape to what the family dynamics were like for Bob growing up. And it's amazing, some of the names and people that have come through Bob's life and through the family. And he shares a little bit about that here.
He grew up with a lot of writers. My father was a writer. He wrote 30 or 40 books that are published in Canada. Our family friends became nationally known when television came along, from what they did with television, but also because of their publishing. Pierre Burton, the name you probably know. Charlie Mowat. I knew all those, June Colwood, Trent Frayne, who else? All sorts of people. But I knew them when I was a kid, because they were family friends. Robertson Davies from Peterborough, one of the Peterborough Examiner, and is considered a serious writer. Literature was what Rob Davies wrote. Rob and Brenda used to come for dinner, Mimi. And, so that was the atmosphere when Neil and I were kids. And my mother played all sorts of different kinds of music, popular music, classical music, everything. And my father, my uncle, Bob, was a really accomplished musician. His kids could sing harmonies that equaled anything. So we heard all of this stuff, Neil and I, when we were kids. And that was part of that was normal. That was normal in our existence. Not all compressed into a week or anything. It was, spread out over years.
So I asked Bob about some footage I've been watching about Moe, and he would tee off from like Coke bottles, which apparently he drank a lot of Coke, and as well like jumbo-sized teas, and he was very, very good at being showy on the golf course. And again, that didn't go over well with some of the traditional golfers, but I wanted to know what was the source of all that fascination with doing something unique in golf and teeing off on these unique things like a Coke bottle. This is what Bob said.
So, my encounters with Moe were, I recognize here's a guy whose artistry is displayed in the way he plays golf, the way he talks about it. He and I had some really interesting discussions, and right near the end of his life, at that little course in New Smyrna Beach, the municipal club, I explained something that I had encountered myself, hitting balls, and I just came to me. I was hitting balls one day, and I thought, the ball has to get to the apex, and then it falls on the target. It doesn't matter what the shot is. That process is the same. Even with a tee shot that has a low trajectory, there's a place where it starts to descend, and you see the whole thing. Anyhow, I said to Moe, I just figured something out. Well, I explained it to him. And he said, what's that? And I said, well, you can find, he was also using what I suggested, which was put the ball at the target, look up the air, find the apex, and your eyes come back along there. You inhale the shot mentally and hit it immediately. Don't stand there and wonder what you're doing. So for some reason, one day I thought, I'm going to balance myself for the apex fall line, because the real target is the apex. So I set my balance up. I could feel it in my feet and legs. I'm turning away the muscles in my left leg and the line of balance up through my left heel were recognizing the apex fall line. So when I turn my left, I'm a right-handed player. When I turn my left in, the muscles on the inside of my leg, what I was feeling was the apex fall line. And in my right leg, I knew where the end of the orbit of the swing was. So the sweet spot of the club, I mean, we were swinging the club head. We were swinging the sweet spot in the club head. That's what's in the mind. The club's this big, and I can see it. The sweet spot, you feel it. And you revolve. The revolving action constituted a wind up and release. Imagine the ball stuck on the face of the club, the one that's sitting in front of you, and you're going to sling it into the flight line that you created. So I said to Moe, I'm balancing for the apex fall line. I said, the ball's going further, and it's easier for me. He says, that's very interesting. So away he goes to wherever he would, Titusville, to the Royal Oak Golf Club, the PGA owned in those days, the CPGA. And a couple of days later, he showed up and he said, I got to show you this. So we went up to the practice fairway with a pail of range balls, which he very seldom hit because they're not as good as, a bag full of new Titleists, obviously. But he always hit straight shots from where the ball was straight. What's wrong with straight, he'd say. Nothing's wrong with straight. So that day, he hit a whole range of clubs in the bag, all different trajectories, fades, draws, whatever, with any club he wanted. But he was balanced for the apex fall line of the shot. And then he looked at me and he said, all my life wrong. And I looked at him and I said, you're not wrong, Mo. I never thought of it that way, or I would have said something to you. And, but I understood what he was saying. I didn't you weren't wrong. But what he was saying was, I didn't have a complete picture. Now he figured the picture was complete or closer to complete. He's always looking for ways to improve. And that's what that did. He started to hit the ball better because of the variety of shots. And when he said, all my life wrong, he always hit the ball straight in at wherever he wanted it to be. Now he can see a refined way of getting it into a tight corner on the green by causing it to fall down with a fade or a draw or something. That's what he meant when he said, all my life wrong. He just meant, I could have done better than just hit it straight. I thought, I said, well, hit it crooked then or whatever. It was an interesting relationship I had with him. I go out there hitting balls, and I quite often get the impression that not far away is heard of Moe Norman is watching what I'm doing or watching what I'm thinking.
I asked Bob what he would think Moe would say about this book and his thoughts on having his legacy captured by Bob. And this was the response from Bob, what he thought Moe would think of this great new book.
I think there's a lot of stuff in there he'd like. And, some things that haven't been said before, the odd thing here and there about ball striking. I'll get into it further in the next book that I do because there's more. The source of energy, basically. We talked about this is in this book. This is a minuscule opening of the door into where you can go with this conversation. I said to Mo one day, we're using energy. We can feel energy. We set up a shot. You can feel it. That's energy. So for some reason, I said, look at this planet. The place is amazing. It's got mountains, oceans, atmosphere, and a bunch of people wandering around on it, and trees and whatever, fish. Look at the other planets. None of that's apparently there. The sun shines on the Earth. The Earth revolves around the sun. The energy coming from the sun keeps this place going, including you and me. So he's listening to this, wondering where I'm going with this conversation. He said, all right. I said, I'm going to mentally reach down and see if I can mentally tune with the center of the Earth, because some part of this place has got to be connected to the sun, and it's through the sun that this energy is radiated that we're talking about. So that's what I did. So I don't know, sometime later, it came up again, and he said, "What's happening with that?" And I said, "Well, I feel lighter on my feet. The colors around me look brighter, and everything seems easier to do." And he was watching what I was doing, hitting golf balls. And I said, that's what I'm doing. I'm doing that. So I mean, you can take that idea, and we talked about it. He realized that it was actual. I mean, to attach to it, here's a little item. It's in this book too. We'd say, if you know on the green, if you play golf or if anybody plays, they walk on the green sometimes. They look at a putt and they know they can make it. They hit it and it goes in the cup. No. What happens when that happens? Every once in a while, there's something happens and the ball goes in the hole. Now, if you can figure out how to recreate that feeling, you can apply it to other things. So we started talking about, if you can do that, and it works, and it did, you should be able to hit the ball into the hole from the fairway. You might as well aim at the cup. That's where you want it to go anyhow. Oh, we started talking about that. He knew that that's what I was trying to do. It didn't matter where the pin was, I aimed at it. And we were playing the ninth hole at Spruce Creek one day, which is outside of Daytona, a little bit in South Daytona. They're called Holly Hill, maybe. At any rate, I hit a 7-iron shot, and I looked at it, I felt it, I hit it, and I knew that it was perfect. And I said to Moe, I said, maybe that could go in, and it did. It landed in the cup. So that was, and other things happened, with accuracy. And he was saying, he was intrigued by it. Every once in a while, he'd look at me and he said, nobody knows what you know. Well, I don't know about that, but he said, they don't know what you know. And I said, well, you know all these people in the game. What are they talking about? He said, they're not talking about what you talk about. Not what that. They didn't, And that's why none of that stuff is on the recorded stuff that you see on what's his name's channel, the Graves Golf Academy. There's none of that stuff on there because he never talked about it. If you look at it, you'll see that that's the case. But however, we talked about it. Now, that when you start talking about energy, what I just said goes, mull it over. The sun does shine on the earth, the planet revolves around it, energy flows. And all I was trying to do was tap into the energy so there was more of it. And that's what happened. I could feel something change. But even if you couldn't, that's the sun shines on the earth and the earth revolves around the sun. The energy that we're talking about in the sun and the planets were created. Something causes them to be here. That opens a very big door up. What created the sun? It's a good question, because there it is. Obviously, feel the warmth of the sun. It's an interesting, anyhow, cosmic golf, the zone that the guys on the PGA Tour talk about getting into, it's a state of mind where everything starts working properly. It comes and goes. But where does it come from? And how do you go back there? You have to have a quiet mind is one way. What is that? How do you create that with everything that's going on? How do you have a quiet mind in the midst of all of this uproar that's happening? It's good to speak with you, David.
So I just went on to thank Bob for being on the podcast, thinking this is a great life lesson that we can all apply on the course or off the course. And just thank Bob for the amazing things his family has done for Canadian music and literature and to be the fabric of Canada. Just to thank him and for having him on the show. It was just a joy to have him here with us on the podcast. I also asked Bob what's coming up for him and for Neil and some updates as well. And this is what he said.
My brother's going to tour. Check his tour schedule out and get back to me if you want to go to one of the shows, and I'll make sure that you get tickets for it.
Hang on, are you hearing this? What? Yeah.
They'll be playing Toronto Budweiser stage on May 20th. And then another show, I think it's in Budweiser stage on the 8th of July. But check the schedule out. I've forgotten. There's a lot of shows.
So Bob, thank you so much for your kindness to be on the podcast. Offering tickets. Wow. What a great What a great bonus. Thank you. I really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you for being on Living the Next Chapter. Congratulations on the book. And looking forward to having you maybe back in the future to talk about more of your writings. And again, thank you so much for being on Living the Next Chapter.
Okay, good. Well, I enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I will.
Everyone, check out all the information in the show notes. Please go support the book, get the song, do it all. And again, Bob, thank you so much for being part of Living the Next Chapter. Really appreciate you.
All right, David. Thank you.
Hey, well, thank you for listening. It's a new year, and we're excited to be releasing even more great episodes of Living the Next Chapter. And we want you to come along for the journey. Thank you for being here. If you know of an author that you would love to have featured on the podcast, an author that you enjoy, an author that brings you that excitement, that you would just love to hear them interviewed on this podcast, I would love to hear your suggestion for a future guest. And what would be a question or two that you would want us to ask them on your behalf? Go to livingthenextchapter.com. There's a little speak pipe icon there. You can leave me a voice message. Tell me who should be on the show and give me some question ideas. And I'll use your request and reach out to that author and invite them on and give you full credit for the idea. livingthenextchapter.com. Would love to hear your suggestion, and thank you for listening. Catch you on the next episode.